This episode of the Visionary City Leader Show on Future Cities Africa is brought to you in partnership with GPA Group. The GPA Group was formulated in response to South Africa's need to serve its citizens, not only to transform our country for the better, but to pay homage to the great leaders who fought for a better home for all South Africans. The GPA Group, through a uniquely formulated service offering, strives to continue the efforts of these leaders through the work that they do. Executive Mayor Geordin Hill-Lewis, the Mayor of Cape Town, is my guest today. We'll discuss what it means to be a visionary city leader, his first 100 days in office, how he'll define success over his 5-year term, the importance of partnerships in solving complex problems, future-proofing Cape Town, how the role of the mayor has changed in recent times, and much more. Mayor Geordin Hill-Lewis, it's an honor to have you on the show. What are the major highlights of your first 100 days in office, and what did you not get to?
Thank you. I mean, it's really great to be with you and with the Future Cities team. Thank you so much for the invitation. The first 100 days have been really, really fun. I've loved every day of them, and I'm really loving the job. Some of the priorities that I set myself for the first 100 days, really in 100 days, what you can do is set an agenda or set a tone, and start to set the direction that you want the government to go in. And so I really wanted to show that Cape Town would be a more innovative place, a younger place with some fresh thinking on some of the difficult problems, to set a tone of openness, and to get the message out there in the city that we really want to be the best place to do business, the best place for service delivery, the best place for investment, for ambition in the country. And so I spent a lot of time talking to city staff, to the team, what I call Team Cape Town, and spent a lot of time just setting that kind of tone and that vision and agenda. There were a couple of key deliverables that we needed to get right. First was getting the My City bus back up and running on the N2 Expressway. That took a lot of hard work, but we got that done in 3 months, just a couple of days, about a week before the 3 months. We got that finally, those first buses ran, and that's very satisfying to see. And then we had our adjustments budget process, and that was about making sure that our first mini budget reflected our priorities and what the things that we really wanted to get done. And so there was investments, particularly in safety, making sure that our budget aligned with our key commitment to making Cape Town safer. And really, the first commitment was about technology, CCTV, drone technology. And so there were some big financial commitments in safety tech. And then the thing that I am most excited about was, you've heard, I'm sure, I've spoken everywhere around the country and around the city around my obsession with stopping load shedding over time in Cape Town. And I pushed really hard for us to get our first major tender out for renewable energy in the first 3 months. And we did manage to achieve that. We got our first tender out, and that is out there and running right now. It closes in April. So that's hugely exciting. That's the first big step on the journey towards ending load shedding in Cape Town. It's going to be a journey, but we started it on the right foot. So then, of course, there's some things that I wanted to achieve that just couldn't get over the line. I think the two that I'm probably most frustrated about is, I wanted to do a re-engineering of our public complaints system. We call it in Cape Town the C3 system. Anyone who lives in Cape Town will know what that is. And it isn't as user-friendly and as simple as I would like it to be. And so the team is working on redesigning the back end of it and reprogramming the back end of it to give a much better user experience. And I'd hoped that would be done in 3 months, and it just isn't done. And then I wanted to do a new policy on data, on open data. I want to set the tone for a really open, transparent government, and that policy process is taking longer than I thought, and so we haven't been able to get that out to the public yet. But other than that, as I said, it's great fun. It's very meaningful. It gives me a good sense of purpose. Feels like I'm doing something really helpful for Cape Town and for the country. So that motivates me a lot.
How did you manage the complexity of the transition from the national sphere of government to the municipal? What are the similarities and what are the differences?
The key difference is that I spent a decade in opposition. And in opposition, you do a lot of policy debate and you do a lot of questioning and interrogating and inspecting. But you obviously don't do any delivering. You don't have that any executive responsibility or authority. So that's a huge transition. But there are things that really help you because when you're in opposition, you really get a love for the detail. You've got to really dive into the detail to find what is wrong with something, what is actually going on, what the truth of a situation is. And so that stands you in very good stead in government because in government, every PowerPoint presentation paints a very rosy picture of how nothing is wrong. And unless you have that good training from opposition to actually spot what's really going on, or you have that training from opposition where you actually go to see something for yourself, go to the ground, go to a project. So that stands you in very, very good stead and makes me, I believe, much, much better at this job. The Of course, there's other transitions that are very interesting that I'm still getting used to. It's a bit weird having security with me at all times of the day. It's a bit weird having so many people recognize me. There's some interesting transitions that I'm still going through. But in terms of the job, I think my years in Parliament prepared me quite well. And of course, my personal interest, the area that I spend a lot of time on, is finances, and so the budgeting part of being in government is I'm very comfortable with that. I feel like I have that, having worked with National Treasury for so long. I feel like I have that largely under control.
Mayor, how important are partnerships to you? The city needs to overcome its dependency on PRASA and get rail working. You've mentioned overcoming the dependency on ESCOM to end load shedding. How can we get this done, and what challenges do you see with regards to partnerships across spheres of government and political interests to achieve these outcomes?
It depends so much on the quality of leadership that you have at those organizations. In ESCOM, we have a great working relationship because the ESCOM leadership understands that the future of their business model is not in keeping tight control over the energy market and over energy generation. So they actually totally support what we're doing and understand that that is an important part of their future as a company. You just don't have the same visionary leadership at PRASA because they should not feel threatened by our attempts to or our desire to have more control over the train system. If they genuinely cared about the best outcome for the public and a functioning public transport system, they would also see that their future business model is as a licensing agent for uh, privately run train services, and that is a much better business model for them than the one that they are currently trying very badly to execute. So we are interested in partnerships. I feel like we have a great partnership with ESCOM. I feel like at this stage we don't have such a great partnership with PRASA, but I'm still trying to build relationship with them and keep hammering away at that. And then there's other smaller partnerships in the city which are absolutely crucial. I mean, I think of our partnerships with our special, we call them special rates areas, but essentially the central improvement districts. They do incredible work for our city, incredible work. And we really are so grateful for those partnerships. And I try to speak to them often. We've got partnerships with our neighborhood watches. We've surely got the biggest number of neighborhood watches in the country. And they do incredible work, totally, dedicated, passionate volunteers in the community who do that kind of work. And then there's exciting new partnerships that I'd like to explore. Bigger partnerships with our universities on tech and innovation, how to attract more tech jobs and skills to Cape Town, to locate here. So there's those kind of partnerships as well, which are just in their infancy, but which I'd really like to develop and explore.
What do you believe are the key characteristics of a visionary city leader, and who has typified these characteristics in your experience?
For me, the key characteristic is that you need to have a clear idea of what you really want to achieve. So, a clear vision of what you want to do in the city. Because a city government, particularly in the South African context, with lots of poverty, lots of unemployment, huge populations, there are many, many problems that you can spend your entire 5 years trying to deal with. And I feel like you have to focus. You have to have the ability to focus and identify clearly a few big things that you want to achieve and that you want to see happening in the city, and be able to communicate those relentlessly, and get the city team and residents to back you and to support you in that vision. So I think that's the main the overwhelming requirement. Secondly, I would say you've got to have the ability to get stuck into incredible detail, because the devil is always in the detail, and so you've got to really have a key love of rolling up your sleeves and getting into the detail of all of these projects yourself. Otherwise, you won't get to understand them properly and understand the complexity of delivering them. And who typifies that? That's a good question. That's a really good question. Uh, I mean, I've worked for some pretty incredible leaders. I worked for Mayor Helen Zille for a long time, and that was an incredible mentorship, guidance, and eventually a friendship. So I would say, yeah, that's definitely someone that exemplifies that.
Mayor, how do you define success over your 5 year period in office?
If residents feel like Cape Town is a more optimistic place, a more ambitious place, that is committed to excellence, that's committed to doing big, bold things because they are the right things to do for the future of our city. If residents feel like we've made meaningful progress on some of the big problems that we face, like load shedding, like safety, like public transport, then I will feel like that's success. I want people to feel optimistic about South Africa again, and I want Cape Town to help inspire that optimism, because Cape Town moves forward. Cape Town shows what is possible. Cape Town builds a sense of pride. Uh, so if that happens, then I'll say that that's success.
How do you think the role of an executive mayor has changed, especially since COVID? And how do you prioritize what gets done first?
So much of success in this job is being able to prioritize, and I've still got to do some work on this. I can't say that I'm successful, because when a new problem comes my way, I find it very interesting, and so I start to obsess about this new problem, and maybe it is not one that I should be focusing on. You've got to really discipline yourself to focus on only those things that you want to personally achieve in this 5 year term, and I've still got to work on that discipline. I think that the role of mayor has changed a bit, but it's certainly changed. If I'd been the mayor over the last 2 years, I think that would have been a very, very different story. You couldn't really get out and see people. You couldn't interact with communities. A lot of the focus was on simply responding to the daily crisis of the pandemic, whether it be in our health system, or getting the equipment that we needed, or the getting the vaccines out there, and so on. Oh, and of course the food and poverty interventions. I think that is starting to subside now. We certainly spend a lot less time talking about the pandemic. We're starting to get out into communities again. I've just come from Khayelitsha, as I told you. We're starting to meet with groups of people again, and so it does feel like you're returning to that really enjoyable, people-centered politics, which I love. I really love that. That's part of why I love politics. Uh, at the same time, I think the key change is that it's a wake-up call that we've got to. You can focus on the here and now, and you can allow yourself to become totally consumed with the problems of the here and now. But the lesson of the pandemic is that you've got to actually focus on making your society, your city, your country, whatever it is that where you are in government, more resilient for future shocks. And we don't know what those future shocks are going to be, but you can spend your time building resilience into your city. And so that's something that I'm thinking about. For example, I've put together a future planning and resilience team that reports directly to me, and it's going to spend time. It's a team of policy and planning professionals who are going to spend time thinking about what future shocks may look like and how we prepare our city for to be resilient in the face of those shocks in future.
You've just mentioned the city's resilience and future planning directorate. What more are you planning to achieve with this directorate, and how does it relate to what we've been speaking about?
I think what governments spend far too little time doing is thinking about the long term future, because the nature of government, especially in the developing world, is that it is so obsessed with the current crisis, whatever that is, that it doesn't. We just spend so little time thinking of what Cape Town is going to look like in 2050 or 2070, and that failure to plan for that future is really a very significant failure. And I think so many of our problems actually come from not thinking about that which is coming down the track in the long term. So the purpose of this new directorate is just to spend some quality time thinking about what we want Cape Town to look like in the next 50 years, what it is likely to look like, what are the pressures we are going to face from urban migration, from density, from climate change, and how do we begin to plan for those things now, so that we don't behave as if it's some big surprise when it comes down the track, when we should have known about it all along.
Mayor, what does spatial transformation mean to you as a leader, and what does it imply to the city? What are the tensions and compromises that you anticipate, and how will you tackle these differently from your predecessors?
Firstly, it's a really excellent question. It goes to the heart of what we have to achieve in Cape Town. I think for me, it means meaningfully unstitching the legacy of the Group Areas Act, which still defines so much of residential patterns in South Africa and in Cape Town, and has been very, very slowly unpicked in the last 27 years. That is where some faster progress needs to be made, and that's certainly what it means to me. The key way to achieve that is densification in the urban core, and that comes with huge tension because residents are often opposed to densification, not because of any opposition to diversity, but because they just don't like the idea of a densifying city very near to them. The classic NIMBYism. So overcoming NIMBYism is a massive tension that we have to deal with in the city if you want to densify, and you can't really unstitch the legacy of group areas unless you allow for quite significant densification. Even regardless of that, just the fact that in the next 25 years, Cape Town's going to double in size. It's going to be a city of 9 million people. You've got to. There's no way you can handle that kind of population growth without very significant densification. So there's that imperative. I think the other issue that you have to overcome is one of public transport, because densification can only do so much. But the fact of the matter is that there are still going to be, for all of your and my lifetime, there are still going to be massive informal uh, townships in Cape Town. And the way that you can connect those people who live there to opportunity is through an effective public transport system. So it's not all just about densification and more affordable housing in well located parts of the city. It is also about fixing public transport. You've got to do both of those things. And so the the collapse of the public railway system is a huge social justice issue in South Africa. It is a massive handbrake on equity and integration. And then I would say the last issue or tension or threat that you have to overcome is that of infrastructure, because you also can't densify unless you have the infrastructure to support that densification. And this is where Cape Town has got a lot of work to do, is that we want to densify. There's a lot of support at a policy and political level for densification, but in many parts of the city, we do not have the infrastructure to support it. And so there's got to be huge infrastructure investment to support the growth of the city in those key parts.
And in closing, Mayor, what's your diary holding for this coming week? Any insights into the week of the political head of SA's second largest city?
Let's have a look. On Friday, I'm meeting the mayor of Stellenbosch to talk about things that we can do together. There's quite a lot of opportunities for us to work together. On Saturday, I'm doing my weekly cleanup. I'm sure you've seen that I'm obsessed with cleaning up litter, because I really want to clean a Cape Town that people show pride in. So I'm cleaning up in Boerkaap. Then in the afternoon, I'm going through to Mitchell's Plain for the Mitchell's Plain Festival. The Sunday, I'm with my family. That'll be nice. Monday is Human Rights Day, and we are doing, I don't know if you've seen, we've been doing these open streets dining events in streets all around Cape Town. So that'll be really nice. Then next week we get stuck into it. We've got legal briefs. An in-depth look at supply chain management processes, because that slows down infrastructure investment terribly when you have these long delays in tenders. Then I'm going through to Simonstown for their ratepayers meeting. We've got some work on the IDP that's happening now. Then on Thursday, meeting with Westgrow, they're part of our economic growth team. Then we're doing some policy work. A meeting with the Gift of the Givers. That's going to be really cool. Dr. Suleiman from Gift of the Givers. Rounding off the week, meeting my other neighbor. I'm going through to Steenbras Dam, because we're doing some work at Steenbras Dam to upgrade it, and it plays a very important role in our load shedding plans. And then I'm meeting my other neighbor, the mayor of the Overstrand municipality, to talk about how we can work together in some partnership opportunities between Cape Town and Overstrand. So a very busy week next week.
Executive Mayor Geordin Hill-Lewis, thank you very much for your time.